So some of you might be wondering where I'm going with all of this topics, because 2 weeks ago I talked about dice and happened to leave out the fact that many RPG gamers tend to have a verifiable mountain of the stuff just sitting around in random bags, and I think I might have a problem. But then I follow that up with a discussion on the character sheet's ability scores and how that relates to what your character can be good at and stuff. You might be wondering, is this going into a discussion on the character sheet more in depth, or is this going into the math of the game? And the answer is yes. Because today I'm going to talk about multiple subjects in one, but I'm going to start with what I think is the simpler of the two, and also it gives me an excuse to just grab dice as a prop and leave an entire pile on my table to look at. My OCD couldn't deal with that. So those subjects I want to talk about today are two very distinct things. One is about the math and design philosophies of the game, and this relates to the numbers and the dice. The other relates to the character sheet and character building, is races. So, we're going to talk about that later. For now, we're going to talk about the design philosophy, because ironically, that's a simpler subject. So the designers of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, they had an idea. And that idea was sparked on by actually some customer surveys and stuff. Basically, the fans of the game, they wanted the game to have certain things in it. The first was that they wanted monsters to still be viable at higher levels, and the second was they wanted, less math, less number crunching. So the designers took this and made a system that they call bounded accuracy, which keeps the numbers low and keeps things kind of at the same level throughout. This is why, you might see some stuff from older editions and realize that a bit of the design philosophy was more numbers equals more fun. Well, here in the real world, people don't want to just add numbers back and forth all the time. They want to have some stuff that means something. So, bounded accuracy. This means that the numbers rarely ever get above 10. And if they do, you worked for it. You made that happen. But the average D&D player is going to be, the math is very simple. You're going to roll a d20, and you're going to roll a number that is less than 10 to that total. It's very simple math. If you can add and subtract, you can play D&D, you can play the core gameplay, and that's it. Anyone can get in here. Another thing they did was to keep the math simple, keep the game system simple, and keep it flowing, was they added the advantage and disadvantage system. This takes the place of situational bonuses, like, you get +2 for being behind cover, all that stuff. These situational bonuses would add up. You'd be trying to figure out what you add to your dice rolls, and honestly, it could be a headache at some time. They decided to just get away with that. No, instead, if you have any of these situational bonuses, the Dungeon Master could award advantage, which means instead of 1 d20, now you're rolling 2 d20s, and you get to pick the higher roll. Awesome. This does come with a flip side, though, and that is disadvantage. If ever you are at disadvantage, well, now you're rolling the 2 d20s, and you have to take the lower roll. And it speeds up gameplay. It just does. It keeps things simple. How else can I describe it? You roll 2 d20s. If one of those is a 10 and the other is a 3, you get that 3. Congratulations. That's because you have disadvantage. But if you have advantage, you get that 10. And I'm going to stop talking about the design philosophy of the game right now, because honestly, it's something you can get lost in the weeds doing. And I don't really want to do that. No, we're going to take that nice little segue over to talking about races now. At its core, a race is just a template that goes on top of your character sheet that gives you certain bonuses that are just there at level 1. These are, there is kind of a philosophy to follow. Every race has an ability score increase. You usually get +2 to one ability score and +1 to another. Some stuff is flavor and fluff. You have a size category. Most characters are medium, and size does its own little thing in the weeds of combat. Your speed is, so in one turn you can move this many squares or this many feet. However, abstraction languages, most dungeon masters just use that as fluff. We're not going to touch on sub races right now, but yeah, it's, to look at it objectively, you just have a few bonuses and a few other abilities that just get tacked on to what your character can do. Now would be a perfect time for me to go through the books and tell you every little detail about every little race, but the problem is there's a lot of different races, and they're all kind of short to talk about, but there's still a lot of them, so look, this is one of those things where I don't think doing one video on it is a good idea. And it's purely because there's just a vast majority of things, there's just a vast amount of things to talk about with it. So instead, we'll keep it simple, we'll keep it broad. So every race is pretty much defined by an aspect of fantasy writing, usually from Tolkien fantasy or some other writers as well, borrowing heavily from legends and myths. But basically, you get the idea behind the character race, like a dwarf or an elf or a human, and they try to make that thing work in gameplay and make sure that the race still feels unique amongst them. And usually these are built around a theme. The perfect theming for this I can give you is the Dungeons & Dragons theme for humans. See, the thing that makes humans special is that they're adaptable. And what this means is that whole ability score increase I said earlier, well, there's two ideas you could go with that for humans. The first is that you can get basically +1 to all of your ability scores, which kind of makes you just a little better, but not that much. And the other thing, which I think is far more useful, is the variant rule, which is you get +2 to any ability score, and then you get to start with a feat. Now, feats are an optional rule in 5th edition, but they are basically better. And what they do is they add a little bit of extra fluff to your character, which kind of makes them stronger. So if you can get a feat, that's great. Otherwise, you have to wait until level 4 to get a feat, and the design philosophy of this game was off of the back of 3rd edition, where feats were kind of the core gameplay thing. You had to build a skill tree of your feats in order to make it work. No, they decided no, every feat should be unique, every feat should be viable. So every feat is kind of really powerful, but they're very rare to get. So being able to start with one kind of makes humans a little better right off the bat. Not saying everyone should go for human, because there's plenty of reasons to play, say, an elf, or say a dwarf, or a halfling. Every single race is made unique, and that is the point. And that is the reason why I'm not going into it. Honestly, if you're interested, Player's Handbook or Basic Rules. Basic Rules has four races in there. You can read up on it for free. Player's Handbook, you have to pay a nice fee for that, but you get quite a bit more. I say it's worth the investment. And well, that's kind of the video this week. We're going to close in this shot of my pile of dice, probably too much dice, and annotations are going to come in, and I'm not going to explain them this time. You guys know what they do by now. So just look at them, look at the dice, click on any of those links to stick around the channel, subscribe, like, comment, share. If I stress the share part because this channel can only grow if more people come view it, and so if you think this channel should grow, you should help me out, share this video, and get more people watching it. Alright, beyond that, well, I'll see you next week. We're probably going to talk about classes, and we'll see what else I can throw in there. Alright, so later.